Those of you who watched the Lib TV over the last few weeks will have noticed that we touched on some of the paedophile claims in the United Kingdom. May not be something that has been top-line news here in the United States, but trust me, it is going to be huge as and when this breaks, and it's going to break. It will be huge. We're going to be covering it here because it's just so fundamentally troubling and disturbing and really despicable. The recent news today is the fact that the United Kingdom's Independent Police Complaints Commission, which is the equivalent of the Internal Affairs, is investigating Scotland Yard over the extraordinary claims that police officers themselves were guilty of suppressing evidence, halting investigations, and colluding with politicians to cover up a paedophile network operating at the heart of the British government. Now, 14 such alleged incidents took place between 1970 and as recently as 2005. The alleged breaches were uncovered by detectives who are probing the existence of a VIP paedophile ring that was allegedly protected by the Thatcher government and included high-ranking members of the cabinet, police officers, and even, it emerged over the weekend, a member of the royal family. Mark, I make no apologies for getting really dramatic and the gravitas there. This is something, for me, it's very personal because this is the government, the Thatcher government was the government that I grew up with, and I was brought up to believe and trust in my government, and trust in my government at an absolute level. And certainly, even if you start to question some of the actions that your government does in terms of, I don't know, let's take, for example, the invasion of the Falkland Islands and the validity of doing that, or the miners' strike and the fact that Thatcher crushed the unions, and all of those things that people can question. The fact that something so despicable as this was going on when I myself was a kid growing up, this is awful. I mean, it's so fundamentally crushing. And the fact that it's been going on for such a protracted period of time, and up until 2005. Now, we're talking, as I said, there are 14 separate instances here. Some of this involves not only, and it's a paedophile ring that allegedly involves a number of different locations. I'm not going to have the time to get into the specifics of it, but there's a place in Dolphin Square, which was a luxury set of flats. It's a stone's throw from the Houses of Parliament, where apparently there were these sex parties would go on involving teenage boys, members of the cabinet, police officers. There was supposedly a Grafton House, which was supposedly a house for abused and disadvantaged boys, where they would go and recruit these kids from. So these were kids where really with no parents or with no real ties to the community. Very vulnerable children. And there was another house, another establishment called Elm House, which was, it became a bit of a knocking shop, to be perfectly blunt with you, where homosexual men would go but it then graduated into not just being a place where people would go and have consensual homosexual sex, but where these people would take, these people in this ring would take young boys and would just find, and people would turn a blind eye to the fact that it was going on. And this goes all the way through the echelons of the British government. And even to the extent where there's allegations, as we said at the top there, involvement of member of a royal family, and also allegations that boys were murdered at some of these parties. So 3 separate instances of boys being murdered. One that was hit by a car, deliberately hit by a car in Dolphin Square, and 2 other boys were allegedly strangled at these parties, one by a Conservative member of Parliament, and one by somebody else where a Conservative member of Parliament was present and witnessed it. And nobody did anything because these were boys that could just disappear. Now, those I have to stress, all of this is allegations. There are allegations flying around about who these high-ranking people might be. They've long been allegations and suppositions that one of the high-ranking cabinet members was Leon Britton, who was Home Secretary, which was one of the top positions. He's since passed away, he's died, but there's allegations, and I'm not going to necessarily substantiate that. I'm going to stress that it is an allegation at this time. No charges are ever formally brought.
Well, these are all very serious allegations, and why is it now that this is starting to come out, and will the information get more specific?
Well, they're hoping that it's going to get more specific. It's come about because of the sort of tireless work. It just eventually emerged. But what is so disturbing is you get reports from police officers who were present when we talked about Cyril Smith the other week, who were present when Cyril Smith was there with drunk boys, 14, 15-year-old boys, at a party with another senior member of the Manchester Constabulary police officer, and this young police officer walks in on these people, and he's told in no uncertain terms, you forget you ever saw that. If you ever breathe a word of that to him, we're handling it. If you ever breathe a word of that to anybody, you're done for. And so there was just this conspiracy. And so nobody's speaking out, but now eventually people are starting to speak out about it. The victims didn't want to speak out about it because these people were protected from up on high. This is what the IPCC deputy chair has to say about it earlier this week. She said, these allegations, Sarah Green, these allegations are of historical high-level corruption of the most serious nature. We will oversee the investigations and ensure that they meet the terms of reference that we will set. Allegations of this nature are of grave concern, and I would like to reassure people of our absolute commitment to ensuring that the investigations are thorough and robust. Up until now, there's been this veneer of investigation. And certain people, for example, the people that ran Elm House, which was the place that we discussed, mentioned earlier on, they were imprisoned. They were finally convicted, charged, and imprisoned. And so it was up until 2010, it was for, oh, well, that was just something that happened. But now it's just emerging with the passing of Cyril Smith, with the passing of Leon Britton. These things are starting to come out. Redacted files, dossiers on these people on these paedophile rings that just mysteriously disappeared. All of these snippets of information are coming out. Everybody had a vested interest in covering it up. But now with the passage of time, people are finally, I think it's because of Operation U-Tree and it all kind of started. The chrysalis for this was we talked about with Jimmy Savile. It's the chrysalis of that is starting to emerge and starting to come out. But it's so troubling. The revelation about the royal family is interesting too, and this is what Buckingham Palace had to say. They said, if detailed substantive allegations are made, they will be taken seriously and looked into. However, we are not in a position to comment on speculative stories based on a chain of unnamed sources. But again, the fact that they moved to make that, they're normally very stoic, Buckingham Palace. So the fact that they're moved to say something is interesting as well in of itself. It's going to be fascinating to see how this develops. It's something that is just profoundly troubling. I predict that this will really blow the lid off the British government, the Conservative Party. I hope to goodness that it does. I hope to goodness that it's fair and thorough and honest. Let us know your thoughts. Thanks for being with us here. If you haven't already, subscribe to the Lib TV.